All right. Welcome and good morning, everyone. I'd like to get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for How to Conquer Life Invaded by Mental Illness. I'm really excited about this topic. I think it's really important. So before I introduce our two speakers, I would like to cover a few housekeeping topics. So today's webinar will be recorded. You will receive an email with the link that you can revisit or you can share with your colleagues, so feel free to do that. We also invite your comments and questions. At any point, you can put those in the Q&A or the chat box, and I will either present those to the speakers during the conversation or we'll hold off and we can answer them at the end. So our speakers today are Carolynn Morris and Sammy Rowlette. Carolynn is an HR consultant at GoOne and a strategic communication consultant and certified life coach at My Orange Soul. Having studied communication at Utah State University and received her master's of strategic communication at Westminster, Carolynn has gone on to further her career and passion for consulting, speaking, and coaching. Carolynn is joined today by our guest speaker, Sammy. Sammy is a wife, mother, certified holistic coach, and essential oil educator. Life has dealt her a fair share of trauma, but she has learned those events do not have to have a crippling power over her current state. She is passionate about showing others that they can have and hold happy now, no matter what circumstances are around them. Her mindfulness lifestyle principles help others to simplify and detoxify their life so they can shift their energy and reframe their narrative in order to stake their claim on their abundant lives they are divinely promised. She believes stress can be managed and avoided and put to use. Movement, music, and Mama Nature are our powerful allies. Emotional intelligence is more valuable than IQ. If you're having fun, some things may need to shift. Or if you're not having fun, sorry, things may need to shift in taking care of ourselves so we can take the best care of our families. A paradigm shift from surviving to thriving is the difference between can't and can. In hope and healing and simplicity and nature goes beyond our plate. So, sorry, let me share our deck. And I am going to turn the time over to Carolynn to get started.
Perfect, Shannon. Thank you so much for the introduction. I really appreciate it. Sammy, thank you so much for being here with us. I am so grateful that you're here. And to let everybody know, we're going to be running through 3 different pillars to help us navigate mental wellness and help us to re-strategize and recalibrate. And we're going to talk about self-awareness, self-management, and social awareness. And Sammy, let's chat a little bit about self-awareness. Self-awareness is a big, big deal, and it's something that we really need to hone in on. So unpack that a little bit for us of what self-awareness is and how we can incorporate that into our daily lives.
I love that. Thanks, Carolyn, and thanks, Shannon. You know, as I was listening to her introduce ourselves and the information inside explaining where I'm coming from is self-awareness all bundled into one. And my expertise in this field does not come from certified training in this exact field. It truly is that personal experience where that expertise is coming from. And so with my training and other certifications, and in my mindfulness training, and now in my yoga certification, self-awareness, now I see all of those tools come into one, my personal experience and my professional training now. Self-awareness has always been one thing for me, Carolyn, and it truly is boundaries. It's honoring boundaries and understanding ourselves under stress. So just a little backstory to where I came into the mental health arena personally. I had just had my first daughter, just married, new house, new job, and I had this paradigm of I'll be happy when I have all of these things, right? And in that case, I experienced, we had some medical issues with my daughter. I had health issues myself, marital concerns, all of those things. And stress became my mental state of mind, my emotional state of mind began to physically interrupt my daily life. And that was the boundary that I understood, where our thoughts equal feelings that equal physical action. And so that's where my awareness came from, Carolyn, was the direct response from our emotions causing physical ailments, and understanding that boundary on overwhelm specifically, and what overwhelm emotionally, where we feel it and where it manifests physically, is a huge self-awareness tool that we can use, because we can know the signs that our body's giving us, and we can kind of revisit our values and turn back that awareness.
Those boundaries are huge, because we're beings of evolution, and so we are constantly growing and evolving, and boundaries are really like a framework and a guideline for teaching people how to interact with us physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, socially. All of the boundaries, if we are not sharing those boundaries, then how in the world are they supposed to know? They're not going to know, because we have to, sometimes it's through our body language that we tell them, and sometimes we have to say it with our words of, this boundary has been crossed and that's not appropriate. This is how you can interact with me moving forward, and explaining what that looks like and what that feels like. But making sure, like, sometimes when we get those cues that you're talking about of like, ugh, what was that? Ew, why is that yucky to me? What is that feeling? And it's because that boundary was crossed, and realizing that's it. That boundary was crossed. Now we need to calibrate, and understanding what that looks like and what that feels like to us is going to be huge. And something that I've come to realize, especially with boundaries, is as a society, we've kind of overstepped some boundaries, that it's all of a sudden culturally normal to ask, how are you doing, as a greeting. So for our poll, we have a poll question, everyone. We want to get your input on this. And so if you wouldn't mind putting this in the chat box or in the Q&A, what is your response to how are you? What does that look like to you? Because so often we get this question and it's just in passing, like, how are you? And then people keep walking, and it's like, pardon, did you just ask me how I was doing? Because I have more to share. You know what I mean? So we'll give you about 15 seconds to put those in, so we can get those responses in. And Sammy, isn't it fascinating how we've kind of evolved from how are you doing being like a question of connection versus a greeting? And why is that?
Yeah. And you know, from my experience that I was sharing with you, Carolyn, that was as a young mom in my space, I had grown to not show that I'm not okay. I was teaching school at the time. It's hard to relate to that. And I think the shift comes from our personal, not either there's perfectionism that we're afraid to not be okay. And so we disassociate feeling bad with being bad. And I think there's that disconnect of these false facades that we wear. And then when the doors are open, we have these smiles, right? And then behind the door, when the doors are closed, we're dealing with issues that there's shame and guilt and concern and honestly confusion. And I think that's the disconnect holistically, is our ability to bring emotion. That's that self-awareness, to bring emotion to the human experience. I'm not going to be good every day.
No,
that's okay.
Absolutely not. That's okay. So I'm going to read a few of these comments. It says, some people respond, so far so good, fine, very generic, well, depends on the day, fine, okay. You got time for the long answer or the short one? I really like that, because it's like, hey, I hear what you're saying, and do you want the short answer or the long answer? Because I may have something awesome to share with you, or I may have something that's a little bit more tender to the heart that I may need a little bit more of your time. And I actually really like that, because that shows self-awareness of, okay, you asked me a question. Do you have time for the long answer or the short one? And so it's showing respect for their time and your time, and respecting the environment. Oh, Ted, that was awesome. Thank you for that ad. You really don't want me to stop you and share, so fine, thanks. Oh, that's so heart-wrenching when that happens. Usually I'll say fine, but sometimes I'll say fantastic, stressed, and tired. It really throws off the person asking. It really does, because it really has become such this, like, hey, how are you? Good, good. False, you're not doing well. I'm stressed, I'm tired. Fine, but I mean it as much as they mean how are you. Oh yeah, people will match that cadence. People will totally match what you're saying, because how you enter a question is how people are going to respond. So if people are more serious about it, then they'll take into consideration far more of what's going on, depending on who is asking and when and what's going on in the response. Totally. Environment and intrinsic stuff that's happening, totally. I totally appreciate that. I'm okay, thank you, how are you? Yeah, very generic. I would say I'm great and ask questions back, but saying and you. I don't mind the question, but my answer depends on the situation and context. Yes, that context makes a huge difference. And it totally depends on how people enter into that. And I detest that question, knowing it's not meaningful and only a passing question. Oh, Sydney, I hear you loud and clear. It is so frustrating to have that. Everyone, thank you so much for participating. We really appreciate you answering that question, because it helps us understand too where we're at. And so, Sammy, we moved from like self-awareness to self-management, and that question kind of illustrates some of the self-management that people are doing, where it's like, well, do you want the long answer or the short answer? It depends on the context. It depends on how people are moving into that. So how can we develop more self-management in our mental health wellness?
I love that. And honestly, it goes back to, I'm going to keep relating to the same experience as a young mother, as I was teaching school. And I show up for school with a smile on my face for my 30 kids, and all heck is breaking loose at home, but I am there in my professional space, right? I'm fine, because that's in context. I am in my professional setting, and I'm showing up because I need to show up this way. And I had a coworker ask, how are you? It's kind of like your body language shows how you are. And I physically actually was starting to begin showing symptoms of my emotional mental state at the time. And I had this friend notice this, and right there in the hall, I was done for. And I had to step outside and have my principal actually start class that day. And going back that's when we kind of hit those rock bottom experiences, where what tools can I have in my tool belt for experiences like that? And at the time, I didn't know. I didn't know what was wrong. I didn't know what tools I had. And so that's where my passion has come over time, is knowing that we have these tools. So Carolyn, exactly that, self-management tools. When we have moments where maybe we're being triggered by the question, and saying, I'm fine, I'm good, has come at you at a day where you've stuffed it in one too many times, and you're okay, I'm good. You're not, and you've met capacity with your physical body holding all of that inside. So one technique that I have learned over time, and it can be so easy, it can be done anywhere. You can understand where you can take a step outside, you can pause, and it involves using one of the most powerful set of tools that we already have. We are built in. Our bodies are incredible machines, and they are built in with these. There's 5 of them.
I'm ready, Sammy. Lay it on me, sister. I'm ready.
There's 5 of them, okay? They are our eyes, our noses, our ears, our fingers, our ability to touch, and our tongues, our taste. 5 powerful tools in mindfulness that we can use for self-management when stressful situations have come. Because where do we physically feel emotion? Oftentimes it's a tight chest, it's a headache, it's knowing where these triggers affect us physically. So our management strategies are going to do just that. For me, I'm going to use anxiety as an example, that I've been overwhelmed, a boundary has been overstepped, and my breath. I literally can't catch my breath. I'm in panic mode. My body has sent a cascade of hormones that are telling me that there's a tiger chasing me, which in reality, there's not. But my mind doesn't know that, but my physical awareness can. And so I'm going to do something super basic that's going to let this know it's okay. We're safe. And it is exactly this. I am just bringing my physical body back to the present moment by tapping my fingertips and taking a breath, taking an inhale on each connection. And that is connecting our neurons in our mind. It's releasing that oxygen, filling our cells with that calming. And just taking a breath is going to allow us to refocus. And this can be done under the table. It can be done if you need to take a restroom break. Coming back to our breath is powerful and can be done at any time, anywhere.
And that's a beautiful thing. And that's something that is so easy to do. And nobody has to know what you're doing. I mean, you can literally do that anywhere. And another one that I really like is the name it to tame it methodology. Mm-hmm. It's super helpful to be like, what am I feeling and how can I tame that? And sometimes it's like, I am feeling stressed because I haven't sent this email. What do I need to do? I'm going to block out 15 minutes and I'm just going to go ham down on this email and make sure that it's done and square it up and be done with it. Or another one is, you've taught me this actually, Sammy, is to name something in the room, to like call out the color, to call out the pattern, to call out something in your mind, because sometimes we have like a million different tabs going on in our minds. And it's like, oh my gosh, did I pick that up at the grocery store? Did I actually turn on my crock pot for dinner tonight? Did I feed my dog this morning? And you just start having all these different tabs. It's like, okay, Carolyn, I need you to focus. Name something in the room. Okay, this person is wearing a blue shirt. This person has brown hair. This person has glasses. And it's just like, all of a sudden, it's like, okay, I'm bringing myself back into this moment and bringing myself back into, quote unquote, the room, whether that's virtual or in person. I'm bringing myself back into this and helping myself manage that type of environment so that we can actually move forward with that. So, Sammy, yeah. I'm all about, isn't that so cool? Our bodies are so cool that we can actually self-regulate. We have to become self-aware. And then once we become self-aware, we can actually self-manage and become much more involved in our wellness. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And physically, just these techniques, that present moment awareness is bringing down that cortisol level to where we're not having spikes in cravings and different physical cascades that come from just this one overwhelmed experience.
Yeah.
Can be powerful.
And something that I really love to do is I love to go on like a 5-minute walk around the block. Sometimes that's all I need is I need to physically remove myself from the location that I'm at and just go on a walk and get some fresh air. And then you start to do those mindfulness techniques of naming, okay, what are 7 different colors that I see right now on my walk, or whatever that may be, whatever that looks like for you. And that's the beautiful part, is that mental wellness is ours to own. And so however we do that, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be different for everyone. And that's okay. In fact, that's beautiful, because then we get to learn from each other and figure that out. It's a wonderful thing. So we have self-awareness, we have self-management. Let's talk a little bit about social awareness and what that means and what that looks like. Let's unpack that.
I love that. And it's just going to build. The social awareness honestly comes from the education. So we begin with our own personal experience and educating ourselves and visiting our own personal values. And then as we become familiar with that, our social awareness can expand to educating ourselves about others. And in a sense, there's three things, Carolyn, with social awareness, in particular to mental wellness and mental health. There's three of them. It's to educate ourselves. And as we educate ourselves, we can naturally educate others through our conversations. Seeing the person, not the condition. And then also taking action. So let's unpack each one of those a little bit. The first, educating ourselves, right? Knowing what our tools are, understanding our mindfulness tools. Where can I go to understand more neuro tools? How can I understand emotional mindfulness techniques? Educating ourselves on our company's policies, on when I come to work and I'm half a human, where do I go when I do need support like that? Because the number one thing that happens when we're in those frames of mind is that we're alone and we're embarrassed and we're shamed, and then we don't search for help. So knowing that safety guideline is huge. So educating ourselves on our tools, educating ourselves on our policies, knowing what's there to support us. On the second part is seeing the person, not the condition, right? And this is what you kind of brought up earlier, Carolyn, was that disconnect between the human experience and going from how are you to how can I help, and being able to know and I think that's going back to number one, educating ourselves so we can help others, because one day if there's someone in need, we can know where to help them turn to in our experiences, right? And yeah, do you have something to add to that, Carolyn?
No, I think if we as friends and colleagues can educate ourselves to help other people, to hey, you know what, I'm not professionally equipped for this. I do know a few other resources that have been phenomenal by, whether that's you have a professional network of social workers that can help with that, or you're like, you know what, yoga has been really helpful for me. Do you want to come with me to yoga? It's going to be virtual for the next little bit, but let's do this together. And it's we all of a sudden take out the awkwardness of saying, I need help, of oh my gosh, I'm so grateful that you told me. Let me get in the trenches with you. And this is how I've come to learn to have better mental health, is by doing yoga, by going and seeing a counselor, and maybe medicine is important. Maybe that's part of the holistic picture. And it's not a one size fits all. It's not going to be siloed to this is the only way to ever do mental health. It's not going to be like that. So figuring out what works for you and your body and your mental wellness is going to be yours to own. And when we invite other people into that space, it's because we have psychological safety with each other. We're like, Sammy, you and I could be like, Sammy, I'm on the freaking struggle bus, sister. What is happening? And I can tell you very candidly what's going on. And so making sure that we open up those doors of psychological safety and open the doors of connection and being authentic with that, of hey, you know what, I don't personally have the skill set or the professional tools to do this. Let's find someone who does. And truly meaning we can figure this out, because you confided in me and you showed me a portion of your heart that other people may not ever see and they may not ever experience. So I'm not going to take that lightly. I'm going to get in the trenches with you, and we are going to figure this out, because mental health is a we victory, and let's do it together. So I think absolutely having those resources and recognizing I don't have all the answers, and that's okay. I can find someone who does, though. I can find someone who can help you out there.
Yeah, which brings us to our third point in taking action, which raises awareness to this, which opens opportunities for better legislation, for better policies, for just that open conversation where we do have more resources. We do have more opportunities to look for help, right? We go to the grocery store and we've got 50 different loaves of bread to choose from. It's gonna be the same by us being vulnerable to share the truth in this human experience that we're all in. We rise by lifting others, period. Because what would a world be like if we walked in and there were 50 varieties of mental health and wellness, and that those were more available to us, especially as employees? I know when I was teaching school 10 years ago, we had credits for being healthy and different things like that. But now we're getting credits for a yoga class, and different, because we've been able to open up about this, it's only going to benefit the human experience as a whole, because my improvement then ripples to my family ripples to my community. Same thing in our businesses. We personally show up there, it ripples to our team, it ripples to our company, and that productivity that comes from healthy employees. Hello, right?
Game changer.
A win-win for sure.
Totally. I'm such a fan of this, and I want to actually open up for a short Q&A. We have a few minutes left, and I know that if I was listening, I'd be like, oh, I want to ask a few questions. So we are going to open up the last few minutes for questions. So if you have questions, please put it in the chat box, and Sammy and I will definitely welcome those. And as people are going to be putting those different questions in, Sammy, what do you think is the one critical component to making that pivot shift from I feel alone to I want to reach out for help? What do you think is that little shift that we can make in ourselves and in our minds to be like, okay, I feel alone, I want help? How do we make that switch?
It's going to go back to your self-awareness. It's going to be step one. It's going to be your internal narrative. It's going to be your story that you're repeating over and over and over again. What story are you telling? And is it a victim mindset of the story, or are we the hero of the story? And that victim mindset is, this is happening to me, somebody's going to come save me. Or the hero mindset is, this is happening for me, I'm going to save myself. And that's where we come. It's pivotal. And this really, in my own personal experience, was between me being here and not being here. And that was it. That was the realization. So I think, Carolyn, I know that kind of goes way back to the beginning, but it really does. It comes to that self-awareness and what tapes are we playing?
Yeah. Change those tapes. Change that playlist. Mm-hmm. If you're not liking what you're listening to, it's okay to ask for help and be like, okay, I don't know actually how to change my playlist, but I know I want to change it. So where can I go to get those resources? And reaching out for help is a big part. And as friends, as neighbors, community members, colleagues, leaders in our spheres, we have to be equipped with that. We have to be the ones to be like, I have resources for you. And it's going to be like the bread aisle. I have a lot of different resources for you to look into. And so, Sammy, it has been nothing short of delightful chatting with you. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your skill set and all of those things. If anyone would like to get in touch with us personally, we have our information. Carolynn at myorangesoul.com, as well as my website at www.myorangesoul.com. And Sammy Rowlette can be found at Sammy Rowlette at ohthereyouare.com, as well as www.ohthereyouare.com. And a fun fact is that Sammy and I actually do corporate wellness retreats. And so it's a holistic approach. And so if you're interested in learning more about that, you have our information. Go One has a plethora of opportunities to do online learning. Please check out their online library, and we look forward to serving you in a few weeks with our next webinar. And have an awesome rest of your day, everybody.